Hello and welcome to this episode of PenguinShell Personality. I know it's been quite a while since I made one of these. Thank you to everyone who liked the previous videos and subscribed to the channel. It was really appreciated. I'm planning on coming back with much more consistent content, and I'm going to start off by going through all of the different MBTI types. So today we're starting off with the INFJ. So without further ado, let's begin. So as you can see here, this is the INFJ stack. On the top we have on the top we have Introverted Intuition, then we have Extraverted Feeling, then we have Introverted Thinking, and then we have Extraverted Sensing. So every stack will have this where it goes introverted, extroverted, introverted, extroverted, or extroverted, introverted, extroverted, introverted. They always go back and forth like that. If you aren't sure what I'm talking about with this, I do recommend that you go and check out one of my previous videos. I'm going to put a little link to it in the top right corner, so you can jump over to that video if you haven't seen it yet. So let's move further into this now. So introverted intuition, you might recognize this from my first video where I went through all the functions. Some of these, as people pointed out in the comments, are pretty stereotype based, but honestly I'm not sure what better way I could use to just describe these very succinctly and very quickly. So if you want more info about these, I definitely recommend doing your own research and looking into it. Maybe at some point I will make a video that's just focusing on each one in depth, but for now this is what we got, and I think it's all right for this. So introverted intuition relies on gut instincts to form plans. So INFJs are generally the sort of people that are going to care about what's happened to them. They're going to care about anecdotes. They're going to also still care about facts, but they're going to care about anecdotes and facts in order to solidify their mindsets and find a path forward. So INFJs, and the reason I'm starting with INFJ is because that's what I am. So I figured this is probably the simplest place to start. INFJs are very plan-based generally. That's why the introverted intuition is at the top. Think of their thought patterns as a line. You move from the beginning of the line to the end of the line. There isn't a whole bunch of jumping around. There might be jumping around to collect ideas to make this line that leads from point A to point B. Hence the idea of being concerned with the big picture, concerned with more the broad sense. What's going to happen if I do this? What's going to happen because of this? And a lot of these times people are more interested with ideas, abstract concepts, and theories as opposed to concrete facts. Again, quite stereotype based. That's not to say I don't care about concrete facts. Just personally, to me at least, what I find more interesting are general ideas. I love fiction. I love television shows and books and movies and all that sort of stuff. I consume that sort of media because it's not very fact-based. It's very much based on these abstract concepts. So as I said, moving from point A to point B, great at knowing how to get to a certain end. And then there's getting a feel for a situation. There's that, generally what we think of as intuition, this gut instinct and these feelings, this idea of, oh, I think if I do this, or this might happen, or the idea of just a very instinctive understanding of a concept. That understanding might not always be right, but often these people can have these ideas proved right because they are picking up on things subconsciously. So let's move on to the next slide here. Introverted intuition is dominant. So there's this personality stack, and as you can see down here in this picture, introverted intuition is at the top, meaning that it's dominant, it's at the forefront of the personality, and it determines whether the person's introverted or extroverted. As I think I stated in my last video about the 4 different placements of these personality traits, of these functions, the dominant one determines introverted extroversion. And as I think I said in the previous video, everyone has introversion and extroversion. A lot of the time people figure, oh, I'm just introverted, or oh, I'm an ambivert. Personally, I'm not a fan of the term ambivert because I think everyone is an ambivert. Everyone has introverted parts of their personality. Everyone has extroverted parts. Maybe not every, but I think there's very few people that are completely extroverted or completely introverted. And sorry, moving on from that. At the forefront of our personality is so at the forefront of an INFJ's personality is this introverted intuition. This is someone with generally keen insight into things. And they're very aware generally of this insight, of their ability to move from point A to point B. A lot of the time, people with this personality are drawn towards things like writing fiction or researching topics in depth. Because of this, they like seeing, oh, how do I get from this idea to this idea? And everyone relies on their dominant function when they're younger, so INFJs rely on this introverted intuition from when they're younger. So now we have extroverted feeling. So people with this are deeply affected by those around them, and they'll sometimes go with the crowd in many ways. That's not to say that they're generally necessarily pushovers, but more so I would say than introverted feelers, at least in my mind. In a lot of cases, they're more likely maybe to agree with the general opinion, to have the idea of, oh, I want everyone to agree here. I want this argument to end with kind of this mutual consent. I know personally I really don't like when two sides just won't budge on an issue, even if I agree with one side and I think the other side's totally wrong. Something within me just doesn't like that. I like the outer harmony, as it says here. And I'm also very intent on finding how I fit into society, what I should do, what I should be, what I should learn about, and what I'm best geared towards. That's something very important to me. So, for example, right now I want to be a teacher. So I guess these videos help with that. Hopefully they help you. Hopefully I'm not too bouncy. Hopefully I'm not bouncing all over the place. Extroverted feelers generally expect reciprocation, and they're generally supportive and nurturing. They like to see others grow. They like to see others succeed. So in the INFJ's case, extroverted feeling is auxiliary. So again, you're seeing a slide from one of the previous videos. Extroverted feelers, so extroverted feeling develops after the dominant function in this case. So on top of your personality, you have introverted intuition, then you have extroverted feeling. These two things are constantly working together to produce results. This is very different from the INTJ, which only one letter away, very different. I'll make a video on the INTJ and maybe comparing these two a different time. But this is why the INFJ, there's this idea of them getting these instinctive pulls or these gut reactions, this feeling. Generally, INFJs are very aware of how others are feeling around them, and thus they can use their intuition, their planning abilities to manipulate feelings sometimes. So this is the extroverted feeling, and it's extroverted feeling because the previous personality was introverted intuition. So they play off of each other, they help balance each other out, and really this is the core. This is the core of the personality. This is what you'll notice about a person the most. So if you're trying to figure out your own type, maybe try to think about the top two functions first. Think of what does this mean? That won't always necessarily work, but hopefully it can work for you. So then we have introverted thinking. And this is the third function. So this is getting lower down, but it's still, I mean, all of these are important. So this means that an individual will be analytical, objective, logical, that they test new information against existing facts, that they use exact words when expressing their ideas, that they need to know why things work the way they do, and that they are very inventive. Now, I need to state here, just because you're an INFJ and you have your introverted thinking as your tertiary function, that doesn't mean that you're going to display all these. Don't expect yourself to display all of these, but at the same time, you should look at some of these and go, okay, well, do I display any of these, right? Where does introverted thinking fit in my personality? Does it fit in really much at all? So, using myself as an example again for the INFJ, I always am testing new information against existing facts I have in my head or existing facts I can find around. That's how I usually determine the validity of something. I still, though, usually I have the extroverted feeling on top. When I'm debating with somebody, I'll usually bring my emotions into it before I bring logic, which often is not the best thing to do because that can make you seem very, well, emotional, as obvious as that sounds. So let's move on to the next slide here. So introverted thinking is tertiary, as I'd said. Yeah, it's tertiary. So this is opposite and kind of in generally in opposition with the auxiliary function. So it's in opposition with extroverted feeling. Very different things, right? you have this introverted, locked in your mind. I'm often thinking in my head. I usually won't expel state when I'm thinking a lot of the time because I'm just turning it over in my head because that's a very introverted process for me. Even if I'm using that logic to get from point A to point B, it's in my head and it comes after the extroverted feeling. So again, using the example of myself, I'll write story plots out or whatever because I like writing fiction and I like reading fiction. So I go, okay, well, I'll write my own thing. So often my original plot, it'll have a lot of emotional moments, it will have a lot of character growth and all this sort of stuff, but it's totally lacking in logic. And I have to go through and fix it, right? Because nobody wants to read a story that's so unbalanced that there's no logic to it. I think any story needs some sort of logic, and I think most people can agree on that. And if we think of a personality as a story, we generally want to be balanced, right? We want all of these functions to be developed as much as possible. As I've gotten older, this personality trait has developed more. It's become more well-rounded, and I've begun to control my extroverted feeling better, which is a good thing because now other people's emotions aren't affecting me as much because I can think logically about it and I can go, okay, well, it's fine. You can't always fix everything. You can't always do this or that. So that's a good thing, right? Now we're moving on to extroverted sensing, which is at the bottom, as you can see here with this picture. And generally, so for an INFJ, this is at the bottom. This is generally a struggle for them. I would say almost always probably a struggle for a while at least. And because you're locked in your head so much, thinking, this intuition, this introverted thinking, it's hard to experience the present moment, for instance. You aren't always, you might frequently zone out. You might lose track of time because you're just running through your own head. You aren't aware of what's going on around you, at least as far as things in the environment or smells or sound or things like that. But you might be very hyper aware of other people's emotions, but not this sort of this tangible nature of senses, which goes in direct opposition with abstract concepts, right? So these two are bouncing off of each other, but it's very good with both of these to have a balance. You want your inferior function, so in this case, extroverted sensing, to be developed. You want to try to work on that. You want to try to focus on your surroundings. So let's go through here. So extroverted sensing is inferior. Again, in direct opposition to the dominant function. For example, if your dominant function is introverted intuition, your inferior function will be extroverted sensing. This will change for every personality, of course. And as I had said, people have difficulty with this. This is difficult for INFJs generally. So, okay, so now we're on to the next time. So to just wrap up the INFJ thing, I hope that helped you a bit to maybe understand a bit more about what an INFJ is. It is hard to give just a description of a personality, and a lot of these online websites, I mean, they can be useful, but they don't necessarily give the most useful information. A lot of them won't even bring this personality stack into it, which I think that's kind of the foundation of all this stuff. So you need that, right? You need that part of it, that component, or else it's not all really working as a cohesive group. So next time we're going to be going through the ENFJ, and as you can see, one letter has changed. Just you went from introverted to extroverted, and everything has every single function has shifted, even though you have the same types of function, right? You still have the introverted intuition, you still have the extroverted feeling, you still have the extroverted sensing and the introverted thinking. All the order is switched, and that's going to change the personality dynamically. So now you just have this little penguin, my little mascot, saying, remember to like and subscribe. Here are some other videos for you to watch too. So I suggest jumping through those if you haven't already. If you have, thank you so much. Remember to comment down below. Let me know what you thought of the video. And just we can all discuss some things together. So again, thank you to everyone who has subscribed to this channel, who has checked it out. I really, really, really appreciate that. And I apologize for not bringing more consistent content. My hope is that I will. So, everyone who watched this, I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll talk to you next time I put a video up, which will hopefully be sooner rather than later.